Welcome down the rabbit hole, friends. I'm Katie, and we are just 2 days away from the new Casey Anthony documentary dropping on the Peacock channel. But for now, I'm spending my time wrapping presents and packing for this super long 30-plus hour flight back to the US with my 2 kids for the holidays. I'm so excited because we're finally going to get a chance to see our family, and we have a new baby born in the family. But in between all of that, I'm heading down a rabbit hole. I've been looking at all of the crazy interviews and information that's been released over the past several years regarding George and Cindy Anthony.
We've been watching you for so long.
You haven't?
I love you.
I love you too. Hi.
We forgive anything that you've said or done.
Hold on. Can we turn the volume down? Yeah, you can probably hear it. My head's gonna explode. I haven't said anything. Don't worry.
Are you okay?
Yeah, I'm good. I just talked to Lee.
Casey, you don't realize the whole United States is looking for our Kaylee.
I know that, Mom.
Her cover's going to be on People magazine in a few days.
Okay.
Everybody is looking for her.
Good.
Everybody is looking for her. Are we going to be able to find her, do you think?
I hope we can, Mom.
To be honest, from the beginning, I felt so much empathy for George and Cindy. None of us are perfect parents. I'm certainly not. And I'm sure that George and Cindy have made grave errors in their parenting over the years. But let's be honest, in comparison to their daughter, we've never received any information that would lead us to believe that George and Cindy are guilty of chloroforming one of their children and leaving the remains out in the woods. Most likely, whatever they may have done can't compare to what Casey ended up doing with her life. Some people might disagree with me, and I must state that I'm always ready and willing to change my opinion if new evidence comes into play. I certainly would have a different opinion about George and Cindy if some new information came to light that they had treated Casey horribly when she was growing up, or that they did anything to Kaylee. But for the most part, I've yet to hear or read anything that provides any insight to whether or not Casey was really mistreated by her parents. Certainly not in the same way that she mistreated her own daughter. But still, there's no denying that over time, information has come out about George and Cindy Anthony. And it's always left me wondering what really went on in the Anthony home when Casey was growing up.
Casey, I want to ask you just a couple questions.
Good.
I know the pictures with Kaylee in Zanny's apartment. Is Zanny's apartment the ones with the drums?
She had a drum set, yes.
The one in the picture.
I think there were even other pictures. I told Lee to look through everything.
Okay, is that Zanny's apartment? Because I know whose apartment it is. Is it Zanny's apartment?
That exact apartment, no, that was Ricardo's apartment. It was set up a lot like Zanny's apartment.
Okay. Do you think Zanny's acting by herself, or does she have help?
I don't know, Mom. I haven't been able to talk to anybody. I don't know. I'm hoping that if there's people involved, there's as many people that are dumb enough to open their mouths and say something as possible. But, Mom, I have nothing to go off of at the moment. I don't know.
In 2011, Casey Anthony was acquitted of several counts related to the death of her toddler, Kaylee Anthony. Many Americans were so shocked by the verdict. There was a lot of circumstantial evidence to suggest that Casey had major involvement in Kaylee's tragic disappearance and death. Casey's parents, George and Cindy Anthony, also walked away from the verdict a bit shell-shocked. Not only did the couple lose their granddaughter, but they also had to make sense of their new normal following their daughter's acquittal. They spent a lot of time trying to figure out how to go about reforming relationships with Casey and finding peace with the trial's outcome. George and Cindy's lives were forever changed by this controversial case. And to this day, they still disagree about what they presume happened to their granddaughter, Kaylee. When Kaylee disappeared in June 2008, George and Cindy held out hope that their granddaughter was alive. And Cindy especially remained steadfast in her belief that her daughter was innocent. Some of that changed, however, in the years following the murder acquittal. George has stated that he took some time to digest the prosecution's case and came to the conclusion that Casey may have accidentally done something to Kaylee with. This is a popular theory among armchair detectives. October of 2017, George first shared his belief in an interview with Crime Watch Daily, and then again in May 2018 on A&E. In that 2018 documentary, George said that he's convinced Casey gave Kaylee, quote-unquote, something to make her sleep, and then the little girl never woke up. This is a theory that I've definitely subscribed to since the beginning of the trial. It's something that makes a lot of sense to me. We know that Casey was out partying and having a great time for at least the year before Kaylee's disappearance. She told everyone that she had a nanny watching Kaylee. But now we know the nanny didn't exist. If Cindy wasn't watching Kaylee and Casey was out partying, where was Kaylee during that period of time? One of the only things that makes sense to me is that Casey may have tried to drug her to get her to sleep in the trunk of her car while she went out to bars. As for Cindy, she doesn't buy into George's view. Cindy told Crime Watch Daily that she suspects Kaylee accidentally drowned in the family's swimming pool. I truly, honestly don't think Cindy said. I don't know if it was an accident or what happened. I don't know if Casey got distracted and Kaylee in the pool. But in 2022, Cindy says their new grandson is part of what keeps them going. Casey Anthony's older brother, Lee Anthony, welcomed a son named Parker Lee Anthony into the world on August 22, 2013. The birth marked one of the few happy occasions in George and Cindy's otherwise dark lives, and Cindy and George have come to credit Parker as their reason for living. When asked if Parker saved George's life, George said, "Yeah, he did." Cindy is on the same page when it comes to Parker's positive influence. "He keeps me going, knowing that I see him and have my time with him," she said. "It's not the same as with Kaylee. Kaylee lived with me, and he knows that his playhouse was Kaylee's." Ugh, that's so sad. Additionally, Cindy and George talk about Kaylee with Parker all the time, something they say they find comforting. "Her pictures are everywhere," Cindy said. Although Parker will never fill the void Kaylee's death created, the couple feels happy that they're finally experiencing some joy again. Most recently, the couple admitted that their relationship can be really tense at times. When a couple goes through a traumatic event together, and this is one of the most traumatic public events I've ever seen an average couple go through, it's just not uncommon that the relationship is going to change. No one knows this better than Cindy and George. They say that they struggle on a daily basis to keep their marriage afloat, especially amid constant public scrutiny. The interview in 2018 made this reality obvious. During the interview, the couple was grilled about the lies Casey told her parents and the authorities before Kaylee's body was found. During the interview, Cindy appeared really frustrated with the questions, and she seemingly lost it when George complained that he was often blamed for his daughter's misdeeds. Cindy snapped at George. "Casey learned by example. You lied to me for several years, and that's where our daughter got it from." The conversation then took a turn for the worse when George told Cindy not to, quote-unquote, deny the notion that he was blamed for different things Anthony did throughout the years. Cindy then stormed off the interview set as George yelled at her to, quote-unquote, shut up. Following the outburst, A&E shows us George consoling a crying Cindy in their bedroom, and she apologizes for her remark. If you're not aware of what Cindy's talking about when she brings up George's history of lying, let me give you a quick synopsis of what followers of this case already know. George Anthony has a history of lying related to his addiction to gambling. Before Kaylee was ever even born, George had gambled and lost a significant amount of the couple's money. To cover it up, he lied to Cindy and his children about where he was, what he was doing, and what was going on with their finances. Cindy was working hard as a nurse, and she was eventually shocked to find out how much money they had lost. It all came to a head when, in an effort to recoup some of the money George had gambled away, he decided to invest in some kind of weird scam. It turned out to be a Nigerian prince scam. I guess George was desperate and also a little bit gullible. He ended up getting heavily involved in the scam and lost even more money. Eventually, he had to come clean to his family, and Cindy and George had to work really hard to try to recoup some of what they had lost. Shortly thereafter, they found out that Casey was pregnant and that they would need to help raise their granddaughter. The story that Cindy tells about the pregnancy is so crazy to me. If you're not aware, Casey allegedly didn't admit to being pregnant until she was like 7 or 8 months along. There are pictures of Casey Anthony at a family wedding with a large, obviously pregnant belly. According to family, at that time, Cindy was still denying that Casey was pregnant. Some of the people at the wedding asked Cindy about it, and she said, "Oh no, she's just gaining weight. It's no big deal." Everyone could obviously see that Casey was pregnant, but it wasn't for another month that Cindy claims Casey finally told them she was going to give birth soon. The weirdest part of all of it is how Cindy and George described that the moment she told them, they were nothing but smiles and happy for her. When they asked her who the father was, she came up with a bunch of crazy stories that have been proven false. And yet still they said, "We were happy. We were grateful to have our granddaughter. And we told Casey, great, way to go." It's really hard to believe that any of that is true. So there's definitely a history of lying and manipulating within the Anthony family, and this is what Cindy is trying to address with George. The issue with Cindy is that she always comes across as super codependent. She's codependent towards her husband and her children. It's like she clearly knows they're being dishonest or doing something wrong in many scenarios, but because she just wants to pretend like everything is okay and maintain a relationship of control with each of these people in her life, she goes along with the lies and continues to pretend like everything's going to be okay until it finally wasn't okay when Kaylee disappeared. And yet, we can see from these interviews that once Kaylee's remains were found and Casey was found not guilty, Cindy did pretty much a 180 and returned to buying all of her daughter Casey's BS, refusing to look at the truth of what's going on within their family. In 2022, Cindy and George say that they remain close to the former prosecutor on Casey's case, Jeff Ashton. They've kept in touch throughout the years. Why are they so close? I guess they went through a lot together, and also Ashton defended George against Casey's allegations against him during the trial. Not only did Ashton challenge Casey's claims during the trial, but he also gave George and Cindy a heads up about what was going to happen and that the defense's plan included making these allegations towards George. When Ashton sat down with the couple in 2018, he continued to lend his support. After George expressed concern that he was the reason for Casey's acquittal, due to the fact that Casey blamed him for what happened to Kaylee, Ashton assured him this wasn't the case. The verdict was not about you, he said. This was about her and those jurors, Ashton told George. Don't for a minute take any kind of responsibility for this. The jury didn't acquit her because of you. There was so much evidence in the case. The jury acquitted her because they didn't want to convict her, and that's the bottom line. Cindy and George have publicly stated that they went ahead and dismantled the memorial that was put up for Kaylee near the woods where she was found. Cindy and George are often at odds with the public about how to properly grieve the loss of their granddaughter. Many mourners found peace visiting the memorial for Kaylee. It was complete with a cross and stuffed animals, but Kaylee's grandparents didn't find the sight soothing. They say that it was too close for comfort. They walked by it or drove by it every day. They also said that they really wanted to cherish happy memories of Kaylee instead of dwelling on her death. Simply put, they felt that the well-intentioned memorial was just too painful for them. Cindy and Casey visited the memorial one last time and then they dismantled it. George said, "I really don't ever want to come back here again." But to be quite honest, sometimes it feels as if George and Cindy will never catch a break. Just 10 years after Kaylee went missing, the couple received notice that their 3-bedroom home in Orlando, Florida was going into foreclosure. The couple hadn't paid their monthly mortgage payment of $765 for over 7 years at that point. They were definitely in a financial mess. They had also been in pre-foreclosure several years before in 2013. So far, they've been able to find multiple solutions, and people have even made donations to try to help them get through and maintain a home to live in. Many people criticize, and they say that George and Cindy need to cut their losses, sell, and find something that's affordable for them. But I know they've stated it's difficult because the grandparents have kept Kaylee's room intact. And they talk about how they believe her spirit still resides at the property. We know that their grandson comes over as well and plays in the playhouse that Cindy states was once Kaylee's. After Casey insinuated that her father played a major role in Kaylee's death, George and Cindy released a statement that said, "George, who has continued to try and move forward from this tragedy and who was vindicated on multiple occasions, is once again being forced to relive the hints, rumors, lies, and allegations that are being made by Casey Anthony. And this hurts his heart even more now." Cindy has stated that Casey checks in with her now and again. At one point, Cindy was admitted into the hospital and she checked in to see how she was doing. Cindy said, I'm still her mom." George, on the other hand, says that he's done with Casey. "I don't have a relationship with my daughter any longer. I don't want to see her. I don't want to talk to her. I actually lost my daughter and my granddaughter in 2008. Cindy and George say that they are committed to staying together. They state that losing their marriage would only compound their grief and that they really are the only two who can understand what each other have been through. "We have lost more than you could ever fathom. I don't want to lose any more," George cried to Cindy. Not to mention, Cindy has always been George's biggest defender against allegations that he was somehow involved in what happened to Kaylee. When asked if she thinks her husband is guilty in some way, Cindy spoke to their daughter via the camera. "Casey, be true to yourself. Start being honest with yourself and own everything and quit blaming everyone else." In 2022, it's super important to them to continue to protect their son's privacy. Before Casey Anthony went to trial for murder, she was very close with her older brother, Lee Anthony. Lee initially supported his sister, but that changed in the years following Casey's acquittal. While the reasons are unclear, Lee has clearly distanced himself from his sibling. He's done because he doesn't want to expose that to his son, his wife, and I get that, but he's done, Cindy and George have said. Things have also been said in the past about Lee speaking out about Casey's pregnancy from the very beginning. Apparently, Cindy and George repeatedly told Lee Casey wasn't pregnant, even though it was obvious over several months before she gave birth. The rumor is that Lee was only told a few weeks before Kaylee arrived that she was coming. Lee felt this was crazy, and even at that point, he started to distance himself from his parents and his sister. Some people will think it's bizarre, but for me, I get that when you're grieving and when you love someone with your whole heart, you need to feel some kind of closeness with them, even in death. George and Cindy have reportedly found some solace in a shared belief that Kaylee's spirit remains close to them in their house. George claims he's had multiple interactions with his granddaughter. "I've seen Kaylee on a couple of occasions. I've walked with her down the hallway. She walked into her old room. I've seen her in the flesh. I've seen her in my house." He said she even woke him up one morning by tapping on him like she used to when she was alive. And he said, "Oh, it wasn't a dream." Cindy supported her husband's stories in the interview and even has some of her own. She says that she feels her granddaughter's presence in her bedroom. When you walk in, you look around and you can just imagine this cute little girl. The ongoing issue I will always have with Cindy is that when she speaks out about Casey, it's constantly trying to cover up and take on the most positive viewpoint possible about her daughter. Cindy's reality also seems distorted, like Casey's always was. And it's difficult to continue to see her parent be so gullible in their continued attempts to support a girl who did something so terrible to their granddaughter. In 2019, unfortunately, Casey's father, George, was involved in a near-fatal car crash. After the accident, George actually appeared on Dr. Oz to talk about the accident. He was wearing a neck brace, and in the interview, he said that Casey checked in on him after the accident, and he expressed interest in rekindling a relationship with his estranged daughter. Anthony answers quickly when asked if he would like to see his daughter. Yeah, I would, he says. I mean, honestly, I would. I would like to tell her I'm sorry. You know, that I forgive her. I forgive her, and that's hard to say, but you know what? I need to be forgiven by her, my son, and other families or friends I care about. Forgive me for what I've done to all of our lives. It's here that Cindy Anthony actually interjects and says, "You didn't do anything. It was an accident." According to the Florida Highway Patrol, George was driving his wife's Toyota 4Runner on an interstate in Orlando when the accident occurred. His vehicle veered off to the right shoulder of the road and he attempted to swerve back. The car flipped several times, crossing all lanes of traffic before stopping on the median. He was the only person in the SUV at the time of the crash. Florida Highway Patrol said his airbag did not deploy because he didn't strike anything. It's unclear if he was wearing a seatbelt. George was transported to the nearest hospital, and the Florida Highway Patrol said that his injuries were incapacitating. George's outlook on his relationship with his daughter seemed to change a lot after the accident, and George said that he forgives his daughter for what she has put her mom, me, my son, and not having Kaylee here anymore. I would forgive her for all of this stuff. He adds, I've come to understand forgiveness is the only way I'm going to get past a lot of things in my life. I have to forgive. I'll never forget, but I need to forgive. Most recently, Cindy has made it clear that George is suffering from a traumatic brain injury that affects his ability to quote unquote act like a normal person. Cindy says that she pretty much devotes her life right now to helping take care of George. Regarding the new Peacock documentary, we're all waiting to hear what George and Cindy have to say. But George is remaining silent. There are several outlets which are following George down in Florida at this time as we get ready to have the documentary released. But Casey Anthony's father maintained a stony silence after his daughter claimed in a new documentary that he is to blame for his granddaughter's death. This is Cindy and George on November 16th as they were pretty much harassed, and it looks like a Walmart parking lot. George bore a grave look as he walked across the parking lot. He looked away and refused to answer repeated questions about the bombshell allegations that Casey is making once again. His wife, Cindy, threatened to call the cops, but also refused to speak about the shocking claims. In the recently released teaser for the documentary, Casey Anthony says, "It all comes back to my dad." Wow. I expect that Cindy and George will speak out again at some point. They've been very open and public in their responses in the past. At this point, I'm just waiting on pins and needles to hear what Casey has to say. Is it going to be all the same old BS? Will she add anything new to her crazy stories? Will she shed any light on why she is the way that she is? I hope you'll keep joining me down these rabbit holes. I need your feedback. Please comment below about what you have to say about George and Cindy Anthony. Do you think that George is the culprit of whatever crimes were committed against Kaylee? Do you think that George and Cindy created the monster that is Casey Anthony? I can't wait to hear from all of you. And we're just a few days away from hearing from Casey Anthony.